is that rock? Is that indoctrination, or potentially so?
No more than that man over there clapping his hands and having those people do it as soon as he does it.
No, but there you have it. There you have a large crowd of people being manipulated by a couple of people, turning them on. I mean, you don't have to really, do you, go into the realms of fantasy to see echoes of a Nuremberg rally in that, or do you?
Well,
they may be prettier and younger, but aren't they equally out of control?
No, I wouldn't say they're out of control. No, I think that they want to clap their hands, they want to stamp their feet. They think that feels good, so they do it. So what's wrong with that?
On the subject of manipulating people, Frank, you once worked in an advertising agency. You've said that you are using the techniques of Madison Avenue to change the whole country around painlessly. That was in 1968. Is this campaign still going?
I never said that.
Oh,
if you're relying on quotes extracted from interviews, you're in trouble. I've written 2 pieces for publication, one in Life, one in the Hi-Fi and Stereo Review, piece about Edgar Varese. Most of the rest of the interviews that I've done over the past 7 or 8 years have been pretty badly misquoted or badly transcribed from tapes, and so sometimes things that get perpetuated, like for instance, there was one thing that was in a Rolling Stone interview where a guy spent 5 hours with me interviewing me and wound up taking an article. He took other people's articles and took chunks out of it from other papers and stuck it in there and combined it with a bio that was passed out for tours by the office. So, you know, tell me what I was supposed to say again.
Oh, you were supposed to have said, I want to use the techniques of Madison Avenue to change the whole country around painlessly.
I don't talk that way.
Well then,
I'll tell you, my experience in advertising is this. I used to do national advertising for a greeting card company in California, and I was also a freelance commercial artist, and I did some ads for the First National Bank of Ontario, California, and I never worked in Madison Avenue, and I was never employed by an advertising agency, and the advertising that I'm talking about is things on a small scale like that I've personally experienced. However, I am aware of the psychological techniques that can be used by advertising agencies. I'm interested in the subject of semantics, and I will use those tools to express my point.
Well, when you first started, your group had the reputation of being rude to audiences. You would come out and say, "Hello, pigs." You don't insult audiences anymore overtly. Not even psychologically. Perhaps you're trying to put across a serious brand of music. How did the change come about?
Well, I have said to audiences, "Hello, pigs," and I'll tell you exactly the circumstances under which I might say that to an audience. We did something that probably no other rock group has ever done. We worked in New York in a 300-capacity theater for 5 or 6 months in 1967. We did 2 shows a night, 6 nights a week. The show consisted of a stage, our equipment, a box of toys, and the audience. And the audience was oftentimes involved in what we were doing. The audience that came to see us was basically a tourist-type audience, or kids from the outskirts of the city who would come into town to get drunk, to get wasted, to get laid, to get whatever, and we were like a circus peep show on this particular street in Greenwich Village. And so they would come in there and they would behave like pigs, and I would say, "Hello, pigs," and you know what they would do? They would love it. They loved every minute of it. And there were regular people that would come back night after night to see the shows. And one of these, to give you an idea of the type of audience, the characters that would come in, so one kid, I think he saw about 30 of the shows and saved all the ticket stubs. And after we finished our run there, he came and he showed me his whole stash of stubs. But he used to come in, and he always wanted to get up onto the stage. And what he wanted to do was come up and grab the microphone while I was singing and grab it and scream at the top of his lungs and then collapse on the stage. And then he wanted me to spit Coca-Cola all over him. And so I said, "Sure, come on, do it." You know, he did it 3 or 4 times. You know, he came in, every time I saw him in the audience, I go,
It sounds almost like a sexual perversion.
As far as audience goes, and we've seen this clip where there is an incredible audience reaction generated, some people have said that rock can be an instrument in its own right for social change. Do you think that it could either be an instrument for social change, or conversely, is it just a reflection of what's going on in the society?
It can be both. You know, it just depends on how intelligently you want to approach it. You know,
Where do you think the scene is now? What's happening following the falling out of the protest movement in America? The system's gone on.
Let me tell you something about movements in the United States. I find the United States sociologically to be a very fad-oriented country. And no matter what event takes place there, to me, by the time you've had it reported to you, just as an innocent bystander, if you're not directly involved in the phenomenon yourself, by the time that it's reached mass print, it takes on the aspect of a trend, you know, and it starts being merchandised to you. So you hear about a protest movement, and suppose you're in a town where there isn't a protest movement. Well, you've heard about a protest movement, so if your town's going to be cool, it better have one of its own. So you've just been sold a protest movement of some sort, or a new dance craze, or whatever. Drugs go on and off the charts in the United States. Everything seems to work in trend cycles there. And it's all a result of the way the media has manipulated the whole population of the country.
Can you give us some sort of an idea of how you see rock acting as an instrument of social change?
Well, the crudest level would be at the point where noted rock stars start doing singing commercials for Coca-Cola or various other products. You can see that the endorsement of somebody who has public credibility, and in fact many people in the entertainment business have far better credibility than political figures. So if so-and-so whose records you like says such and such and makes this suggestion to you, well, you might go along with it.
Yeah, but surely that's just the personalities. It's not inherent in the music, though.
The directness with which you could cause physical action to occur in a concert situation is something that is within the scope of the power of pop music. In other words, if the guy from Slade who is saying clap your hands and stamp your feet, if he knew how to tell those people to do something that was more complicated than clapping their hands and stamping their feet, and if they were disposed to it, and if it was presented to them in a way that was just right, they would do it. But that's no different than a guy in an advertising agency saying, here we have a detergent. It's competitive with these other detergents. If the box is this color, it'll stick out better from the rack. And if you stack this many designs this wide on a rack, you will produce this desired effect on the housewife when she comes in, you know. And so it's just another clap your hands, stamp your feet, except you pick up a box.
Well, you're painting yourself, to me, as a political conservative in the rock scene. Is that how you'd see yourself?
No, I wouldn't say I'm conservative, but I wouldn't say that I'm how you might imagine me.
No, or how you were. I mean, where is the Frank Zappa that caused people to call you ugly, obscene, and so on?
Well,
what happened to him?
He's still here. It's the same guy. You know, some people can look at me and say I'm ugly. Other people can look at me and say I'm obscene. It just depends on their point of view. For instance, if you're a rock and roll journalist and you want to write something in a magazine, are you going to do an interview with me and say, he's really a nice guy? Who wants to read that? They want to hear, he was really gross. He almost made me puke when I talked to him. You know, and then, so that's the way it goes, you know.
Would you agree that when I read the magazines and papers that write about you and other rock stars, the values of those magazines do suggest that people who read these magazines have very little, if anything at all, in common with the straight world, if you like. But this is a subculture of its own. In a whole range of values, the kinds of language they use,
Well, I don't know about words like subculture. I think that as long as you consider that people within a certain age bracket who have a certain taste in music and a certain lifestyle have to be considered as extracted from the mainstream of society, you're going to be creating conflicts because they are part of the society.
Can I take the risk of misquoting one interview with you? You tell me if it wasn't right. It was a very interesting point indeed. You were alleged to have said in an interview with Jerry Hopkins, whoever he might be, on the subject
who wrote the Rolling Stone article.
Well, you were talking about trial by jury by your peers. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And you said that young people with long hair, you were alleged to have said, young people with long hair cannot be fairly tried by old people with no hair. That isn't a peer group. If you have long hair, the jury should have long hair. If you take drugs, the jury should have taken drugs. If you're a Bircher, a John Bircher, the jury should be Birchers. Did you say that?
Yes, that is an accurate quote.
Right. So, so from that, you must see society then as really a group of subgroups with very little communication between them.
Yes, I see it that way, but it's wrong for it to be that way, you see. And as long as you start, well, you have to break down the barriers of classifying people that way. I classified them that way to make the point about the judicial system in the United States, where if a jury is selected to try you, that it's a game. The whole idea of selecting a jury, I mean, I don't know what you've got here, but it's a game that lawyers play about the psychological implications of the type of shoes a guy's got on. It's going to let you know whether he's liberal or conservative, whether he'll identify with the underdog in the case, and so on and so forth, you know, and each guy who's involved in choosing the jury is going to try and stack it in favor of his case. Meanwhile, the person who is in trouble is the guy sitting in the chair who's got to, you know, be faced with this jury that has no comprehension of his lifestyle, and certain things within one lifestyle may be perfectly okay, and within another lifestyle may be not so swift.
Are you saying that there can never be a system of common values throughout society, or that's just how it is now but could be changed?
I think that the main change that should occur is people should appreciate other people's values.
Can I just take that a step further? Is this, the music you're playing on this Australian tour isn't what some people would call rock and roll or rock. Are you broadening the scope of your music to try and embrace other cultural groupings?
You mean, am I playing things that are not rock and roll in order to attract an audience that is not a rock and roll audience?
Yeah, basically.
No, I'm playing the music that I'm playing for whoever happens to show up to hear it, and they can be any age, any color, any size, any shape, any sex, anything they want to be. You know.
Yeah,
so
but you were promoted as a freak on the posters, and maybe you're not responsible.
I didn't
for
draw
all
the
that.
poster.
Yeah, but you know, you're part of the game. You come out here as a performer.
Yeah.
You've got a promotions man. You've got a big record company which is distributing your records. You're part of the system.
Well, not exactly. No, what you're trying to tell me is that I set these people up by saying that I was a freak and come see this freak and then I stand there and be normal?
Yeah.
No, that's not true at all. First of all, I had nothing whatsoever to do with any Australian promotion. All I did was get off an airplane, go through customs, check into a hotel, and start playing concerts.
All right, well, then it appears that you're just a musician, right? That you don't care what the system's doing to you.
No, I do care, you know, but what am I supposed to do? Go out and personally tear down every poster that looks like that over there?
But
John.
Frank, how would you set about explaining the values of the drug culture to people who have a pathological fear of the use of narcotics?
Well, I'm not part of the drug culture because I don't take drugs, but I can identify with some of the reasons why people are forced to live their lives that way. And they're just under pressure. They feel they're misunderstood in one way or another, and they look for a physical gratification from from chemical substances that change the way their bodies feel and change their attitudes for certain periods of time that give them escape.
What is it that seeks them to need this physical gratification?
Well, if they felt comfortable in their environment the way it was, you know, in real life, then they probably wouldn't need the escape. It's the same thing with people who drink to an excess, who need to relieve the tension of their existence. You know, it's just a different chemical combination, that's all.
And yet, you know, it seems that the sorts of changes that are taking place in the American drug scene, you know, as more and more hard dope starts hitting people, seems to be reflected in a hell of a lot of rock music. It seems to be getting harsher, you know, and more broken up.
Well, as
you know, more complex, possibly.